I get money in my sleep, I could never be weak.
Let me ask you a question, Bush.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to the show. Everybody know. It's your boy Bush, another reaction video. Man. Trap Lord Ross did it again. You know, we on that Epstein stuff, man. You know I gotta stay on that. Because the evil must be revealed. It's your boy Bush, man. But Trap Lord Ross just dropped this thing, and I'm going to react to it because I do what I want over here. Y'all know that. A lot of things add up, a lot of different things. So it's like, was the Illuminati really protecting Epstein all these years? A lot of people died, yo. Suspicious deaths, mysterious stuff going on. We're going to get right into it and check it out because it's kind of crazy when you think about it. But let's go, man. It's a little ill. Let's set it off. Trap Lord Ross, Epstein, the many murders of Epstein. Y'all believe it or not? We'll see, though.
Warning. This video is about a sensitive topic involving violence, assault, and loss of life. We've removed any graphic or descriptive content to comply with YouTube's guidelines. The aim of this video is to provide informative, factual journalism on tragic events in the public interest that does not dismiss its seriousness. All clips shown are under the doctrine of fair use for news reporting and analysis, and some points made in this video are simply opinions and theories. I'm not responsible for third-party information, and this
opinions and theories, but a lot of this stuff is adding up, man. They was protecting Epstein for a minute. A lot of bodies dropped. Let's go.
Video is being made purely for artistic, educational, documentary, and scientific purposes. If you want to watch my videos uncut and extended, go to patreon.com/traplawross, where you can get those for just $2. Also, you can now watch my new drops on Spotify, so go search me there. Here's the video. Jeffrey Epstein liked to paint himself as the product of the gritty streets of South Brooklyn. However, the truth was far more uncomfortable. Born in 1953, he grew up in Seagate, a private, gated, predominantly Jewish community at the edge of Coney Island. His father Seymour worked as a city park's groundskeeper, and his mother Pauline was a school aide. Friends knew him as Epi, older brother to Mark, and a math and music prodigy who at least back then seemed perfectly normal, except for one childhood incident that stood out, a disturbing prank where Epstein allegedly dressed up as a Jewish rabbi to lure a girl close enough to touch. This is a dark and bizarre nugget of history related.
You see what type of stuff, you know. Creepy boy, let's go.
To Epstein that's painfully ironic in the light of recent theories that emerged years later that he was operating some kind of Mossad honeypot operation. But by early adulthood, it was clear that his ability to fail upward would become his greatest asset. After dropping out of college in 1974 with no degree, the 21-year-old somehow secured a teaching job at the elite Dalton School. He was hired by headmaster Donald Barr, father of future Attorney General William Barr, who in another overdose of suspicious irony would later be in charge of Epstein's death investigation. At Dalton, the school became a hunting ground.
That boy was connected from the beginning, man. Rothschild, come on, man. They set him up.
In Epstein's inappropriate pursuit of women. Officially, Epstein was fired in 1976 for poor performance, but some reports suggest that the real reason that he was fired was actually because he'd been aggressively flirting.
How did he get hired? He was fired. How the hell did he get hired? First of all, poor performance. He was obviously not a good teacher.
With students, and even attending their parties as the only adult teacher amongst high school students consuming alcohol. While at Dalton, Epstein connected with Alan Greenberg, CEO of Bear Stearns, and just like that, Epstein traded in his chalkboard for Wall Street, seemingly with no qualifications or track record. By 1980, he had inexplicably risen to be a partner in the firm, advising wealthy clients on complex tax strategies, and even suspiciously landing himself an award, being named as Cosmopolitan's Bachelor of the Month. Now, I think it's pretty telling that as Epstein's career
he do look like mad about you, Paul. Sorry, Paul, you look like you, though. A little creepier, though.
Rose, he was publicly winning awards not for his teaching ability or financial management success, but for his supposed ability to get hold of girls. Funnily enough, the rise of his suspicious financial career would suddenly stall out in 1981 when an internal investigation at Bear Stearns forced his resignation. Apparently, he'd been investigated for giving a girlfriend access to inside information on new stock launches, which he was using to make extra money behind the scenes. After that, he would reinvent himself, co-founding a company called Intercontinental Assets Group. He would brand himself as a high-level financial bounty hunter that was helping clients recover stolen money. And clearly things went well for him, because by the mid-80s, Epstein would be jet-setting between Europe and the Middle East, boasting about connections to intelligence agencies and carrying a fraudulent...
They set him up, man. He already had the connection. He knew they knew his destiny already.
An Austrian passport. The way he was moving like a spy or a mobster made a lot of sense, and soon his most lucrative business opportunity yet would emerge, the opportunity to manage the money of a billionaire. But unfortunately, that job was already taken. But lucky for Epstein, the role would suddenly become available following a suspicious and cold-blooded murder. Before Jeffrey Epstein became the gatekeeper to a multi-billion-dollar fortune, that role belonged to Arthur Shapiro. As personal attorney and financial advisor to Victoria's Secret billionaire Les Wexner, Shapiro controlled the empire's finances, but by 1985, his control was beginning to crack. By then, Shapiro was under intense IRS investigation for allegedly hiding money in questionable tax shelters. In fact, he was scheduled to testify before a federal grand jury the very next day, but Shapiro never made it to the stand. Instead, on the morning of March the 6th, 1985, Shapiro was seen sitting in his red BMW, parked at a cemetery of all places, sharing breakfast with an unidentified man. Then, moments later, that same man, dressed in all black, wearing a broad-brimmed hat and apparently walking with a distinct limp, began chasing Shapiro from the vehicle while firing a handgun, grazing his hip and arm. After cornering him at the entrance of a nearby condo, the gunman fired 2 close-range shots to Shapiro's head before stealing Shapiro's BMW and using it to flee the scene. By the following morning, that car was discovered in a nearby parking lot, wiped clean of fingerprints, all the hallmarks of a professional mob hit. And to this day,
that's some movie shit right there, man. That's some movie shit, some straight CIA, FBI, Tom Cruise movie shit.
That murder remains officially unsolved, but still the timing was impossible to ignore. Notably, a suppressed police report would later point to alleged organized crime connections within Les Wexner's own circle, and suggesting the possibility that the killing was actually financed in order to prevent damaging information coming out on Wexner during Shapiro's expected testimony. Almost immediately then, Jeffrey Epstein, a college dropout with no formal financial credentials or awards other than being a celebrated bachelor, would suddenly assume control of Wexner's 10-figure.
That was the hit that put him in position, you saying? That was the hit that put Epstein in position. He rubbed homie off like that. Pause. Wait a minute. Did he hire somebody? Because he definitely didn't do it. Wow. So that was what put him in position. I believe it too. I'm sorry. I believe that shit.
Fortune. The chilling nature of this bond was eventually hinted at in leaked emails years later when Epstein had claimed in messages that Wexner owed him a debt for their years of, quote, gang stuff. Decades later, during a 2026 deposition, Wexner insisted that the phrase gang stuff was merely just shorthand for confidential business.
Gang stuff. Damn. I heard FBG Duckin, rest in peace, and a lot of urban gangsters say, we started this gang shit. We started this gang shit. Nah. I think Epstein started that gang shit. Oh my God.
Business dealings.
Jeffrey was like a Brooklyn guy. And he, in hindsight, he didn't use words like have a confidential discussion or my opinion or this is secret or private or confidential, personal things that lawyers or accountants might use in normal language. He would say this is gang stuff.
Clearly. But from that point forward, Wexner granted Epstein the sweeping and unprecedented authority over his wealth, launching a partnership that would last 2 decades, all beginning with that brutal mob-style hit.
But Leslie Wexner is a great example here. Leslie Wexner owns Victoria's Secret and L Brands, right? He's the bank that bankrolled Jeffrey Epstein. And I was saying earlier that he signed the power of attorney over to Jeffrey Epstein so that Jeffrey Epstein was able to sell his assets, manage his assets, buy on his behalf. He could sell Victoria's Secret without Leslie Wexner in the room or even his knowledge if he wanted to, because that's the level of power of attorney that he signed over to Jeffrey Epstein when he was his money manager.
As a result of meeting Wexner and taking over his finances after Shapiro's murder, Epstein's fortunes rose suddenly and dramatically, with Epstein having secured full power of attorney over one of the richest men in the world. With that single document, Epstein could borrow enormous sums of money on Wexner's behalf, sign his tax returns, hire staff, and even orchestrate major corporate transactions. And from there, the rewards became staggering. Gradually, Epstein took control of extraordinary assets, including a Manhattan mansion and a $100 million Ohio estate that had once belonged to Wexner himself. At the same time, he began systematically pushing Wexner's longtime friends and senior advisors, tightening his grip on the empire. Initially, some believed that Epstein...
What made this man give up that power? We've been trying to figure this out for months. I think Trap is on to something with this, though. Trap is on to something with this one.
Epstein's rise was just the product of his still unexplained financial brilliance. Later, however, newly released files would suggest that his position may well have been tied to a secret relationship with Wexner, with some articles referring to them as boyfriends.
Did you personally
for sure
have a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
No.
Are you aware that
Epstein had this man scared to death? And Epstein did his thing for him, killed the dude for him, and now he in total debt. And Epstein it maximized that debt. He made him give up everything he got.
others have claimed that you had a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein?
No.
Whatever the true nature of their bond, Epstein clearly understood that his position offered more than just financial leverage. By the mid-1990s, he was leveraging his association with Victoria's Secret to present himself as a high-level talent scout for models. In May 1997, that facade allegedly drew a 27-year-old model named Alicia Arden to a Santa Monica hotel room under the promise of a catalog audition. But once she arrived, the audition story collapsed, and she later alleged that Epstein had attempted to her. Even so, despite the growing pattern of accusations, Epstein appeared untouchable. In fact, at least two senior executives later claimed that they had uncovered his recruitment tactics and personally warned Les Wexner. Yet no meaningful action ever followed, and Epstein's access remained intact. But as Epstein's empire continued to grow, another suspicious empire was about to fall apart, with one of the castaways later becoming Epstein's top.
Epstein was handling gang shit for these people. He was doing gang shit for these people, man.
Enforcer and recruiter. By 1990, Jeffrey Epstein had embedded himself within the world's most elite financial circles, and once again, a highly suspicious death would change everything. At the center of that shift stood Robert Maxwell, the British media tycoon with a boatload of money, power, and respect all over the world. And his notorious daughter would be named Ghislaine Maxwell, and she would benefit from much of the connections that her father had built up over the decades.
Ghislaine, she's sitting in the can now.
Publicly, Robert commanded a vast international publishing empire.
I'm quite determined and confident that I should be successful in getting the Mirror newspaper group.
However, privately, he was siphoning hundreds of millions of pounds from his employees' pension funds to prop up his collapsing businesses. Amid mounting financial pressure, Maxwell reportedly turned to Epstein to help shield vast sums of money from creditors and tax authorities. But then, on November the 5th, 1991, everything would change. While sailing near the Canary Islands aboard his $15 million yacht named Lady Ghislaine after his daughter, Robert Maxwell would vanish, and days later, his naked body would be recovered from the Atlantic Ocean.
I also want to take this opportunity to thank all the many hundreds of people who have sent messages of support.
Although an official inquiry concluded that he likely suffered a heart attack and fell aboard, an autopsy would note significant head and spinal injuries not directly attributable to drowning. Some believe
Wow. They beat him and threw him in the water and said it was drowning.
that he had taken as nearly £2 billion in hidden debt was about to surface. Others suspected that he had been silenced before he could expose sensitive financial secrets that would have caused damage that went far beyond his own empire.
He was in debt to Epstein. £2 billion. Damn.
Declassified intelligence documents later fueled speculation further, suggesting that Maxwell had long-standing ties to international intelligence agencies, MI6 in the UK, the KGB in Russia, and the Mossad in Israel. Years later, Epstein himself would allegedly claim in an email that the Israeli intelligence agency Mossad had murdered Maxwell after he had attempted to blackmail them for £400 million.
He said it right there, bro. He said it right there. But then again, this is Epstein. He could be lying to somebody else in the email. Who knows? Because he said gang shit. You can't trust nothing he say.
In the chaotic aftermath of Maxwell's death, his daughter Ghislaine resurfaced in New York at Jeffrey Epstein's side. While she had lost her father's wealth, she still possessed.
She wanted him dead. She hated her dad. She hated her dad. I wouldn't be surprised. Shit. She helped them do it. She didn't like her dad.
Possessed his unprecedented access to the global power elite, and together they formed a mutually beneficial alliance where Ghislaine opened doors to presidents, royalty, and industry leaders, and Epstein would supply the capital, or perhaps other things that these powerful men wanted access to. Between 1997 and 2007 alone, court records would later show that Epstein had transferred more than $30 million to Ghislaine. Their relationship became romantic and carried into the late 1990s, with Les Wexner stating that Epstein had once even intended to
30 M's to his girlfriend. His top, bottom BI. She the one that was handling the business for him. 30 M's real quick after her pops end up dead.
Marry her.
When did you first meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
Must have been about 1990. Jeffrey wanted me to meet the person he was going to marry.
By 2000, according to Epstein, the romantic element with Ghislaine ended amicably, but the business end of their partnership would continue. Publicly, they were photographed on private jets together and at elite gatherings, but privately, something far darker was unfolding. And as early as 1995, the first documented cracks would appear. Artist Maria Farmer was hired to work at Epstein's Manhattan mansion and soon observed a steady flow of girls allegedly recruited by Maxwell. Then in the summer of 1996, while serving as an artist in residence at Wexner's Ohio estate, Farmer alleged that she was by both Epstein and Maxwell.
On the night this photograph was taken by Maxwell.
Definitely believe her. Believe her 1,000%. For sure, for sure.
Farmer alleges in her complaint that Maxwell and Epstein her there.
How were you doing at that moment?
Oh, I was hysterical.
Farmer alleges in her complaint that when she tried to flee the following day, she was not allowed to leave. She claims a member of Wexner's staff warned her.
His exact words were, "You're not going anywhere. You are never leaving. You are never leaving."
Although she escaped with her father's help, she later described receiving an implied threat from Ghislaine herself.
Farmer alleges Maxwell threatened to destroy her reputation in the art world, and in one phone call, she believes, threatened her life.
She says, "You're going out to jog on the West Side Highway every day, and I know this. You need to be very careful because there's so many ways to die there."
I told you, that girl a gangster. She was Epstein's bottom one, and she was putting in work for him too. She in the can right now chilling. She like, I ain't gonna say shit unless y'all give me what I want. She's a gangster. She did the work.
So you have to be really careful. Look over your shoulder.
Shortly afterwards, Farmer learned that her sister Annie had allegedly been subjected to a massage by Maxwell at Epstein's New Mexico ranch while Epstein watched. Despite filing formal complaints with the NYPD and the FBI in 1996, the sisters encountered a wall of silence. Astonishingly, those early reports remained buried for decades, only resurfacing publicly years later in 2025. And with these and perhaps other damaging allegations brushed under the rug, this allowed Epstein and Maxwell to continue building an international operation protected by the very elites that they were compromising. For nearly a decade, Jeffrey Epstein moved as if he was untouchable, operating within the highest levels of global power, and he was splitting his time between numerous locations like his Manhattan townhouse, his Palm Beach mansion, his Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, his private island, Little St. James in the British Virgin Islands, all while socializing with the world's most powerful men. During Bill Clinton's presidency alone, visitor logs would show that Epstein had entered the White House at least 17 times. Behind that access, however, prosecutors would later allege there was a pattern of systemic that involved a revolving door of vulnerable girls, and it would appear that was occurring at every single property belonging to Epstein. And one of the darkest locations for this operation was his Zorro Ranch in New Mexico, an operation which was connected to a number of suspicious deaths and has led to calls to investigate and possibly even excavate from the property, with some even believing that Epstein may well have even been an uncaught New Mexico serial killer who left over 10 women buried in the desert there.
Wow.
In 1993, Jeffrey Epstein purchased a 7,000-acre property outside Stanley, New Mexico, known as the Zorro Ranch. It flew under the radar during the later investigations into his infamous Palm Beach residence that led to serious charges. Unlike his Manhattan townhouse or private island, that ranch offered near-total isolation, complete with a private airstrip.
It's crazy because those are the properties we know about. But when you're a slick billionaire, crazy guy like this, you got all kind of properties that people don't really know about. You know what I mean? And under different names and things like that. So imagine the shit that go down at them type of places, you know?
And miles of desert shielding it from public view. Years later, reporting began to shed light on what twisted plans Epstein allegedly envisioned for the property. A 2019 investigation revealed that he had discussed plans to, quote, to the human race with his DNA, telling scientists and associates that he wanted hundreds of women to bear his children at the ranch. Meanwhile, victim testimony added another dark layer, with victims such as Rena O referring to the ranch as a cloning lab.
He extensively went on for about 3 hours talking about, like, he called it his cloning lab. He was obsessed with genetics, eugenics, and science. And
he doesn't have any kids, but some people saying our mayor is his kid. I don't know about that, but there's theories saying he can't have kids. He's shooting blanks, and that's why he's obsessed with these specific things like genetics and these, eugenics things like that. They say he can't have kids.
He talked about selective breeding a lot.
Other women like Juliet Bryant would allege that she experienced unexplained medical procedures at this property. Even more mysterious were the large industrial vents around the property that made it seem like there was some kind of larger facility built underneath it.
When I showed some of the footage and pictures to a friend of mine that did security in the Air Force, as soon as he saw the mesa that the mansion was on, so that looks like it is built like something is underneath it. This time, I noticed a whole series of vents on the south side of the mansion that look like industrial gratings for like air conditioning and heating vents and things like that on big industrial buildings.
That's them tunnels. And he got bodies down there, all kind of foul facilities down there.
Buildings, except this is a mansion. This just should ostensibly is a house, but these are big, like in some cases, like 10 or 12 foot by 3 foot wide steel grating.
In 2026, newly surfaced emails reportedly referenced discussions about freezing eggs and reproductive plans. Separate diary excerpts attributed to an alleged victim would describe a child being taken away under Ghislaine Maxwell's supervision and with Epstein named as the father. Additional correspondence mentioned claims from unidentified informants that Epstein had offered her financial incentives tied to for black market purposes. Crucially, that same email would actually mention John of God, a Brazilian cult leader who was later convicted in 2019 and sentenced to over 400 years for his offenses. Beyond these biological experiments, an email originally sent in 2019 resurfaced in February of 2026, alleging that bodies were actually buried in the hills surrounding Epstein's Zorro Ranch.
Eddie Aragon says it was early in the morning in November 2019 when he got this email from someone claiming they were a former staffer at Zorro Ranch. Writing, "Did you know somewhere in the hills outside of the Zorro, 2 foreign girls were buried on orders of Jeffrey and Madam G. Both died by strangulations."
I got the email. I was startled.
The emailer says they had 7 video, but never actually sent the footage, asking Aragon for digital currency Bitcoin.
More chillingly, there were also 11 unsolved murders of women who were found nearby in West Mesa, New Mexico, that authorities discovered in 2009.
The more investigators dug, the deeper the West Mesa mystery became. 11 women, one of them pregnant, all buried nude sometime between 2001 and 2005.
Epstein got something to do with that for sure. Everybody that ever knew him, that's why people are angry at whoever was in them Epstein files, because shit like this.
Investigators quickly identified 7 of the women, but there were still 4 Jane Does. Months went by without any more IDs until now.
The victims aged to 32 would actually disappear between 2003 and 2005, many of them being vulnerable women involved in sex work and battling addiction. 8 additional women who vanished between 2003 and 2006 are believed by investigators to be connected to the same perpetrator or perpetrators. And one of the last women to disappear during that period, Vanessa Reed, would vanish in June 2006, just weeks before the FBI formally launched its federal investigation into Epstein, at which point these disappearances would suddenly stop. Yet 17 years later, as of 2026, New Mexico police still have no answers.
Well, that's right, Doug and Shelley. Police definitely say that they are still on this case. You can see that there are monuments all out here. This one says in memory of Michelle Valdez and her unborn angel. And then you can see where there's just flowers and different monuments placed throughout the park. Now, with that said, we did have the chance to talk to investigators, and we asked them, why is this case so difficult to solve?
I want you to know that this remains an active and open investigation, and we are committed to finding the truth.
That truth dates back at least 17 years. On February 2nd, 2009, Christine Ross and her dog were on a walk. That's when Ross's dog found a bone. That bone determined to be a human bone and led to the remains of 11 women and 1 unborn child.
So when the bones were found in 2009, yes, it was a shock to our community and to the police.
They were experimenting with these ladies' organs for reproductive purposes, for all that weird stuff they're doing. This type of stuff don't go down in those areas. So they wonder, this is weird. This ain't no regular shit for these areas. So what's going on? And then Epstein happened to have a big ass complex on the top of the hill, not even a mansion, just a big, pause. It's like, obviously what's going on, man. Wow. And he was protected by the local authorities and by everybody else because he's paying off everybody.
Department.
Liz Thompson is a retired APD homicide sergeant who worked this case for nearly a decade, along with Ida Lopez.
We, have persons of interest that we're looking into, and we continue. So I just don't want it to be out there where we're losing tips because people assume that we've got this number one suspect, and we're not there yet.
There was no clothing, there was no jewelry, there wasn't physical evidence.
Police say there are 8 women still missing from 2003 to 2006. According to investigators, their cases share similar circumstances as the West Mesa victims.
Law enforcement has not publicly connected these crimes to Epstein, but still, the geographic and timeline overlaps are deeply concerning. And as questions about what might have happened in those deserts lingered without definitive answers, attention would gradually shift from the isolated grounds of the Zorro Ranch to the powerful figures who were moving in Epstein's circle. But despite the New Mexico disappearances slowing down as the feds began investigating Epstein, there would unfortunately be vulnerable women who would lose their lives right up to the point where he would face justice. By the mid-2000s, Ruslana Korshenova was one of fashion's most recognizable young stars. Discovered at 17 in Kazakhstan, she was nicknamed the Russian Rapunzel for her long chestnut hair and ethereal look, and she would quickly become a runaway regular for brands like Marc Jacobs and Nina Ricci, traveling internationally for major shows. However, in June 2006, her name would appear in a far more controversial context. Flight logs later showed that on June 7th, 2006, the 18-year-old boarded a private jet owned by Jeffrey Epstein. And according to those records, that plane was headed to Epstein's Island on Little St. James in the US Virgin Islands, with the passenger list also including Epstein himself and his assistant Sarah Kellen. The trip would occur just weeks before Epstein's 2006 arrest in Florida, but what, if anything, transpired during that visit has never been publicly established. And unfortunately, Ruslana would never be able to speak about what happened on that island because 2 years after that flight, a suspicious tragedy would strike when on June the 28th, 2008, then 20-year-old Ruslana would fall from the 9th floor balcony of her Wall Street apartment. Authorities reported no signs of foul play and claimed that she had However, she would leave no note behind, and friends and family would question this conclusion. A former boyfriend said that she had shown no alarming signs of behavior hours earlier, and a close friend would recall that she had recently returned from Paris and was planning her 21st birthday. Also, her mother had consistently rejected the official findings, and in July 2010, an email later attributed to Epstein would actually reference Ruslana, blaming her boyfriend for her death because apparently he believed in alternative medicine. The same released materials would include a saved image containing a disturbing quote attributed to Korshenova, though no context is provided, the quote simply reading, "Love does not take away from one in order to give to another." Separately, a 2014 investigation by journalist Peter Pomerantsev suggested that she had been involved with the Rose of the World, a controversial self-development group that critics would describe as cult-like. But regardless, while the goings-on at Epstein's Zorro Ranch appear to have been ignored extensively, it would be Epstein's actions at his Palm Beach, Florida residence that were so brazen and damaging to the community that the authorities would eventually have no choice but to step in. But once again, as the investigation progressed, people would continue to die suspiciously, both before and after. In addition to Epstein's New Mexico Zorro Ranch, at his Palm Beach property in Florida, countless more girls would be sucked into his orbit and systemically. Perhaps the most famous one of all was Virginia Guthrie, who grew up in an household and cycled through foster care. She was homeless by 14 and unfortunately the kind of vulnerable young runaway that would be the textbook target for the Epstein operation. And eventually, she encountered a man named Ron Eppinger, an associate of Epstein who ran a South Florida modeling agency, later described in court records as a recruitment front for. He would eventually be investigated and arrested and was facing up to 10 years. But ultimately, he only received 21 months in prison alongside a $6,000 fine. And after Eppinger's arrest, Virginia Guthrie would secure a job at Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago club in Florida. And it was here that the then 17-year-old Virginia was allegedly approached by Ghislaine Maxwell with an offer to work as a traveling masseuse for Epstein. Guthrie would later allege that she was between 2000 and 2002 across Epstein's various properties and to some of the world's most powerful men, including Prince Andrew, billionaire hedge fund manager Glenn Dubin, powerhouse attorney Alan Dershowitz, famously known for representing O.J. Simpson and later Epstein and Trump, the governor of New Mexico, and the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Bill Richardson, Marvin Minsky, the MIT scientist regarded as the father of artificial intelligence, and Jean-Luc Brunel, the MC2 modeling executive who was later accused of playing a central role in managing Epstein's broader network. By 2002, Virginia Guthrie would leave Epstein's circle after marrying her husband Robert and relocating to Australia. According to Virginia, Epstein would openly brag about Jean-Luc Brunel delivering over 1,000 girls to him, and she would also describe hidden cameras inside Epstein's homes, as well as alleging that he discussed using recordings of influential figures as leverage, explicitly telling her that she was a pawn in a scheme designed to ensure the world's most powerful and influential figures owed him favors. But meanwhile, in Palm Beach, authorities started acting on tips in 2004 about young girls visiting Epstein Epstein's estate, and by July 2006, the FBI launched Operation Leap Year, a federal investigation into Epstein's activities. However, in a detail that would later raise eyebrows, Ron Eppinger, the man who had first recruited Virginia Giuffre, would die in a local hospital just 2 months before the federal investigation formally begun, and publicly available records did not specify a cause of death. This was a huge red flag and the first of many highly suspicious deaths connected to the initial investigation into Epstein's operation to women. Perhaps if he was still alive, Eppinger might have flipped on Epstein to save himself, collaborating with the authorities to expose the operation. He's certainly the kind of weak link that a mob-connected abuse think nothing of making disappear, but with basically no information publicly available.
Yeah, rest in peace to him. Dude called, come on, Trap, that's where you tripping. Weak link that they wouldn't mind making disappear. I mean, he a man that died, but damn, Trap ain't playing though.
On his death, this is clearly a huge question mark that those in power would rather you forgot, but his untimely demise may well have been a big part of what happened next, as ultimately, despite the mounting evidence gathered during the investigation, in 2007, Epstein secured what would later be infamously described as a sweetheart deal, as it appeared that strings were pulled behind the scenes, allowing him to plea out to reduce charges of soliciting a resulting in a just 18-month prison sentence, which he only served 13, along with a work release that allowed him to leave the prison during that time.
On June 30th, 2008, Jeffrey Epstein, a Palm Beach multimillionaire hedge fund manager, received what might have been the most lenient plea deal for a serial sex offender in U.S. history. The Miami Herald identified over 60 of his victims, just young middle and high school girls at the time of the abuse. Epstein pleaded guilty in state court to 2 charges and served 13 months. Epstein's punishment was like that of no other sex offender in Florida. He had a private space in a vacant wing of the Palm Beach County stockade, but records show he spent limited time there. He was allowed to go to his private West Palm Beach office, where he spent up to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, often accepting visitors, including female friends.
With a slap on the wrist and just over a year of relaxed punishment, Epstein was able to continue his empire with little oversight. However, once again, behind the scenes, as years went on, more people connected.
That was like a vacation for him. He ain't have to work or nothing.
To his charges would wind up dead under suspicious circumstances. When Alfredo Rodriguez died in 2014, whatever secrets he carried about the inner workings of Epstein's Palm Beach mansion died with him, because for years, Rodriguez had served as Epstein's house manager with access to his daily operations.
Kept any pictures of the young women who would come to give massages on her laptop.
Yes, ma'am.
And you saw those pictures?
Yes.
He was privy to all of Epstein's powerful visitors, as well as the infamous Little Black Book, a contact list that apparently contained hundreds of elite contacts of Epstein's, along with contacts for his network of women that he was luring into his network. Apparently, in fear of his life, as investigations into Epstein had just started, Rodriguez took Epstein's Little Black Book with him as life insurance. But ironically, it might be that his life insurance ended up actually being his death warrant. Years later, in 2009, Alfredo attempted to sell Epstein's Black Book for $50,000 to what would ultimately turn out to be an undercover FBI agent.
Okay. Who created this book? Epstein himself.
You know that's a fact. He's not lying. And look at this fucking FBI agent.
This book was made by Epstein?
All his Mercedes, all his planes, they were supposed to have this. He made all of these disappear.
So he had a copy of these for everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere he was.
Of course he said, I don't have it.
See, somebody that can't peek when somebody's recording them, you see how he's asking these questions and he's all trying to get it all on camera. Sometimes you got to really analyze how people act, though. Man, look at this, though, man.
He would be sentenced to 18 months in prison for obstruction of justice, ironically the very same amount of prison time that Epstein received for crimes against women in his controversial 2008 plea deal. And after his release, Rodriguez would quickly fade from public view. But then in December of 2014, he would die at age 60, apparently the result of an extremely rare form of cancer caused by exposure to asbestos. His death was ruled as natural, but his widow would give reporters a chilling statement saying that he died with so many secrets and that he knew about everyone, including the prince. Unfortunately, he wouldn't be the last person connected with Epstein's 2008 charges that would pass away in the following years.
We're going to see a lot more people start dying.
By 2014, Jeffrey Epstein had faded from daily headlines, but legally the pressure was building. In June 2014, a Florida federal judge would rule that 2 victims identified as Jane Doe 1 and Jane Doe 2 could see details about Epstein's 2008 plea bargain. And then in December of 2014, Virginia Giuffre added claims that she was by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell to Prince Andrew in a high-profile lawsuit. The next year in 2015, Giuffre escalated matters by filing a defamation lawsuit against Ghislaine Maxwell after Maxwell publicly called her a liar. From here, the lawsuit and evidence discovery would drag Maxwell's name back into international headlines. One person who knew that family well was Wendy Lee, who had dated Robert Maxwell for 7 years in the 1980s and later wrote about his life and influence. However, just as renewed scrutiny and legal pressure began circling around the Maxwell name once again, Lee's own story took a tragic turn. In May 2016, she too would fall from the balcony of her London apartment, and police once again concluded that she had taken her. Yet just like the model Ruslana Korshenova, who plunged to her death after...
I heard that story too many times, that falling out of a window and they saying it's suicide. Too many times. Sorry, Eddie Murphy, never mind, but it's a lot of examples, but that seems like a thing.
Being flown to Epstein's Island, that ruling seemed to be contradicted by the plans that she had recently put into motion. She had just listed her home for sale 2 weeks earlier and had spoken about being excited for her plans to travel the world, signaling a new chapter in her life rather than a sudden ending. However, at the same time, she was apparently grieving the recent loss of her mother, a personal heartbreak that friends said deeply affected her, though they did describe her as publicly upbeat and forward-looking. But then, less than a year later, on May the 30th, 2017, another Epstein's victim's life would be cut suspiciously short. Lee Patrick, better known as Sky to friends, was attending Wellington Christian School when she first came into contact with Jeffrey Epstein's circle. In 2003, at just 16 years old, she was taken to Epstein's Palm Beach mansion after being invited to what she believed was a party. According to her account, the friend who brought her there quickly left, and Patrick was led inside by a woman she believed worked for Epstein. There, she said she encountered Epstein wearing and that he handed her $300. In 2008, as Epstein finalized his controversial plea deal, Patrick received a $50,000 settlement that included a confidentiality clause. In the years that followed, her life unraveled into repeated arrests for drug offenses and probation violations, alongside multiple stints in rehab as she battled addiction. Then, on the morning of May 30th, 2017, housekeeping staff at the Treetops Motel in West Palm Beach knocked on her door and received no response. Sky's body, partly covered by a sheet, was later found by the crew, who had to saw off the door handle to get inside. And according to the sheriff's report, her body was covered in bruises, abrasions, and open wounds. Soon after, deputies located the man who had been renting the motel room where Sky's body was found, and he would tell investigators that he had encountered her while driving out of the motel property as she ran down the street. According to his account, she appeared beaten and was visibly under the influence of drugs, and he said that she agreed to return to his room so she could shower and clean herself up. Once inside, he told deputies that he witnessed Patrick using drugs while seated on the toilet, explaining that she had concealed small baggies filled with a white powder inside her bra. After she lost consciousness, he said that he flushed the remaining drugs down the toilet and discarded her glass pipe in the trash. Before leaving to check out, he stated that she was snoring on the bed and he assumed she would eventually wake up. A curious detail that would seem to contradict the narrative that she had bolted the door behind herself, warranting the use of a saw to gain entry. But Lee Sky Patrick would become another one of many publicly known Epstein victims that would tragically pass away in the years that followed, and her death would officially be listed as an... But the next suspicious death would happen almost exactly a year later, once again tied to Epstein's Palm Beach crimes. Only this time, it would be the very man who had been investigating Epstein's crimes that would lose his life. At the center of the original Palm Beach investigation was Joseph Ricari, the detective who led the 2005 to 2006 investigation into Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. Alongside Police Chief Michael Rita, he identified dozens of victims and helped build the case against pressure from then State Attorney Barry Kreischer to drop it. Meanwhile, Ricari and his colleagues later said that they became aware that they were being followed and that their trash was disappearing, and that private investigators hired by Epstein's legal team was examining their personal lives. After retiring in 2013 as one of the department's most decorated detectives, his name nevertheless remained closely tied to the Epstein case. And then on May the 25th, 2018, Joseph Ricari would die at age 50, his death being publicly described vaguely as just the result of a brief illness, with no additional details being released. However, other unverified sources suggested that he had died from a heart attack at 50. Notably, his passing came just 1 year before Epstein's 2019 arrest, and later, when Epstein-related files were made public, it would emerge that Epstein had directly referenced Ricari's death in an email, suggesting even he believed it to be suspicious, even comparing it to a 2017 death of a Russian diplomat, Mergias Shurinsky, who was found dead in a pool after suffering an acute heart attack. However, Shurinsky at the time was 1 out of 9 high-ranking Russian diplomats that had died in the span of 9 months, suspiciously, following Trump's election under similar circumstances.
I told you about Russia's UN ambassador, Vitaly Churkin, who died suddenly in his New York office last week. This makes him the 8th Russian diplomat to die unexpectedly in the last 4 months. He died quickly. He wasn't sick until the day he died. The Kremlin very quickly called it a heart attack. But not only is Churkin's death strange, it's strikingly similar to the death of Russia's 27th, also called a heart attack by the Kremlin, and the death of a Russian diplomat to Greece, Andrei Malinin, on January 9th, the Kremlin also calling that a heart attack.
Now, it's unclear in that email if Epstein is inferring that Putin, Trump, or even himself might have played a role in the death of the detective that had hoped to put him away for good. But either way, Joseph Reccari was yet another name tied to Epstein that would have proved an important resource in any future investigation. Now he too was dead before his time.
Just like the mob, when you're protected by higher powers in that element, in that world. Now imagine the Illuminati, that trilateral commission, you're protected by higher powers. It's simple. It ain't nothing deep and mystical about it. You smell me? It's very, very simple to understand. He was protected by higher powers, and a lot of them higher powers actually had the same interests as him. They love them little girls too. It's a damn shame, man.
Time and before he could once again make a difference in putting away this prolific predator. But regardless, it wouldn't take long before the man himself, connected to all of these people who died, would run out of time too. And unsurprisingly, the death of Jeffrey Epstein himself would be the most suspicious of all.
We already know that boy alive. Nasty work. Nasty shit. Nasty stuff going on. He alive. He was protected. There was a lot of Illuminati stuff going on to protect them. People died, man. And in Mexico, all them girls, that was because of this, the boy, the freak boy. That was because of that. You better believe it. He's behind that. Now, the question now that we got to get into, pause, is all them people that was with him, all those people that was with him, enabling. Y'all think it was just that girl and that's it? Are you crazy? You think it was just him and that girl doing all this work? Man, y'all must be crazy. That's why we on it. You know, no matter how small one platform is, it don't matter. We gonna get to the bottom of it though, because guaranteed a lot of people still running around was letting this stuff go down, man. Anyway, it's your boy Bush, man. I died fighting evil. We ain't with none of that. Illuminati tactics, Illuminati at work. They protected him through all that foul stuff he was doing. They protected him. We ain't having it. Another reaction. Shout out to Trap Lord Ross for that one. That was a good one, Trap Lord Ross. Y'all go check out the whole one. Go check out the whole video. Because Trap always, you know, get down to business for sure. It's your boy Bush. We out of here. Another reaction video, man. Salute. Like, subscribe. Peace.